Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the High Ground. I'm Reed.
Matt.
Today's main topic of discussion, something that's come up more recently in news. It's kind of been a rumor for a while, the last month or two, but it seems like it's going to start gaining traction here in the near future. This whole concept of abolishing the Department of Education. Now, at first glance, I think this seems kind of sudden, out of left field, and a lot of people are worried, scared even at times. Just it's quite the large change, and without a very solid plan in place of saying, "Hey, we're getting rid of this, but here is what we're going to do instead." Something more cut and dry. So even at the end of the day, hey, if you still don't agree with it, awesome, but you at least know what to expect, or you at least have the confidence that there is a plan in place. So, initial thoughts. What do you think, Matt?
On the outside looking in, I'm not a teacher. I have no interaction with the Department of Education, so the inner workings I can't speak to. Um, but like you said, not the factor of not knowing what's going to happen is the biggest issue I have with this plan. It would be different if, like you said, they replaced it with a new plan and they laid out a new plan. They've not done that. All they've said is, we want to eliminate the Department of Education. We want to send it to the states. Well, what does that look like? Is it going to look like gun laws that aren't compatible from state to state? And if you're carrying a weapon and you're crossing the country, do you have to know what cities you can and cannot go to? What state laws are with guns? Like, how's that going to work with Department of Education? I think that should be defined. There should at least be minimum federal standards. Because what I'm afraid of is state to state, they're going to focus on their state's core industries, and maybe even have like curriculum that extends into the college level, kind of like the accreditation process, where if I go to school in Illinois and then I want to come home after a couple of years, are my credits no longer valid because Indiana doesn't accept Illinois credits? Like, how is that going to work? I want them to kind of lay that out, have a federal minimum at least to protect people that go between each state. There should still be some commonality between the states.
Sure. And no, I think that brings up, probably the biggest point is it essentially, yeah, you want to the whole idea is to try to give power back to the states as opposed to the federal government running everything. But the issue you run into, it also creates a more isolationist mentality within the states. Like, instead of I guess you think my first thought of it is, okay, if I want to, travel to Ohio, or travel to Nevada, or I want to move there for something, it's pretty easy to do. Sure, there are different things to consider, different, local laws, different ways of doing things that you have to kind of get used to. Sure, but at least with some kind of confidence that there's some kind of standardization across the board. I mean, think of it like think of it like a restaurant chain for a kind of a silly example, but follow me here. So if I go to a McDonald's here in Indiana, I know what to expect for the most part when I go, check out the menu. Oh, I have a rough idea what's going to be. Okay, there might be a local promotion that I can't find somewhere else? Sure, not a problem. But if I travel
I
to
only with McDonald's.
say again.
I don't think that's a thing with McDonald's.
Well, for instance, but
Pretty
if I
well set across the board everywhere in the states you go. It's not like you're going to go down to Louisiana and get a McCrawfish or something.
Well, we can get into that discussion when it's really interesting across international borders because I've actually gone into a Burger King to where I could get a Heineken and a Whopper, on my tray and go, enjoy it. But call it a song for another time. But
So if we're going to truly make America great again, isn't that the first step? Being able to have a Heineken with our Whopper? Is that too much to ask?
If you're thinking that a Heineken in general is a step forward, I would say that's about 10 steps back. If we're going to try to
It's
genuinely
right
make
now.
things
It's better
better,
than nothing.
I'll tell you what, it's
Would
better
you
than
rather drink a water or a Heineken with your Whopper?
I'll tell you
I
what,
would drink water myself, but
it's still better than drinking Corona. So there, you got me there.
I would rather drink a Voodoo Ranger with my IPA or with my Whopper.
Well, of course, it doesn't taste like straight piss water. But
No,
going back,
it's not.
going back to the point I was trying to make, regardless of where you go in the country, you at least have there's certain things you can expect. Because of the standardization of the restaurant model. Hey, I know that when I go to a McDonald's in Nevada, chances are they're going to have a Big Mac. Chances are they're going to have, Coca-Cola products, whatever.
Yep,
But
it's going to taste the same as what it does in your hometown.
sure. But then, going back to the whole education thing, say if I want to move from Indiana and I want to go move to Nevada, take kids, all that stuff, the amount of consideration and the amount of genuinely deep diving into, hey, what does the education system look like there? Oh, I found the perfect house, you found the perfect neighborhood, everything looks great. But oh, I just discovered that the school system is completely 100, like a complete 180 from what we're used to here, and we don't agree with it. We think incorrect methods are being used or whatever, and suddenly, once again, it gives me more incentive to stay put rather than to venture out and to go elsewhere. And so, you think back way back in the day, Ohio, that's a state, but I consider it my country. Virginia, this is my country. Blah blah blah. Where there's that division, leading the whole Civil War. That but once again, separate discussion. But the whole point is, it's more, hey, I'm a citizen of this state, and Ohio is a completely separate country from me. It's its own, whatever, as opposed to
Mm.
this idea of a more united states. And I feel like it just adds, division into the equation that's not really necessary.
So, kind of or diverting a little bit. In what way should the federal government have rights over the states? Like, I know the biggest premise of the Republican Party is power to the states. Let
Sure.
the states decide. Less government, more state and local government rule. But does that help or hinder the United States?
Well, granted, there can be some positives to the whole thing, but before I get there, to answer your question, as far as standardization, I think the idea of what they have right now is not the worst idea. I think it's just executed in the wrong way. So the idea of having countrywide reading standards, countrywide basic math standards, because no matter where you go, you have to know how to read. No matter where you go, you have to at least know, some
Except
fundamental.
Alabama.
You have to at least know some kind of fundamental math to get to wherever. Then sure, when it gets into the more the older classes where it's like, oh, I want to actually focus on automotive. Hell, I want to actually focus on computers, more computer science, that sort of thing. Awesome, sure, do whatever you do. But then I think we talked about this previously, probably offline. You'd have certain states that would gear their education systems toward their local economies, their local industries. And so, for instance, you take take up in Michigan, schools around Detroit where they'll, if, I'm just throwing a random example out here, but let's say for whatever instance they structure their school, the classes, the curriculum, graduation requirements all around pushing more towards going to work for the automotive industry or some version of that, to where, okay, it's, why are they doing it? Because they think, okay, they're going to graduate high school. They're going to go on some sort of trade, and hey, that's going to benefit our state. We're training them to help better our state. Which, at the end of the day, it's not, it's not being done out of some evil or negative thing. It's, hey, we're trying to better our community around us, which I feel like most people can get behind. But once again, it encourages that. So then, by encouraging, pushing them in this direction, you're inadvertently kind of pushing them away from other directions. So if I, live and born in Michigan, but hey, I actually want to pursue computer science, to where, oh, actually moving out to California or somewhere like that, where they're heavy in it. Oh, well, what am I supposed to do now? I can't afford to move there. I don't have the resources. And so what I want to do is kind of like being
Awesome.
disincentivized
Yes.
until,
And that might in the long run hurt the workforce and its diversity and its almost creativity. Because you'll have kids that maybe want to do something but are in a state that is completely a 180 from that and they don't then pursue it. They'll pursue what they're being taught because that's what they know. And I feel like maybe you'll see a decrease in workforce creativity and diversity, which I mean we know the Trump administration's against diversity. They made that pretty damn clear. Got a war on it right now.
Well, we could probably spend 6 hours going into the whole DEI topic, but in the interest of keeping it towards education for the time being, I think that obviously it's a far into the spectrum as far as it's never going to get this bad, but it essentially encourages and incentivizes this whole. Think back to that movie, The Hunger Games, where you have these different districts to where, okay, this district's focus is on forestry, this one's focus is on coal, and so, you live there, you grew up there, you're essentially groomed to go into that industry. Oh, you feel like doing something else? Well, that sucks. Well, you're here, so you
Yeah,
can't do that. Or, okay, you
better
can move,
move.
or yeah, or you can move, but it's going to cost untold amounts of money. And I mean, the amount of students that I've had over the years that can't even afford to move out of their own neighborhoods, let alone to a different city, a different state, to pursue what they're interested in. It's just the means aren't there. It's not that easy. And so if you limit what's already limited, then I really don't see that's going to end up being a very good scenario for anybody.
So obviously, Linda McMahon, she's the Department of Education appointee. I don't know if she's been confirmed or not. I didn't really listen to much of what she said. But the one part I did hear her say, and she said it very eloquently. She's a good speaker. She definitely shows she is an intelligent woman. Um, but I have an issue with the point I heard her talking about. She said, "Send it to the states. Let the states decide, and we'll provide vouchers for students that don't." So say your kids are going to a school that is underperforming, um, you can get a voucher that allows you to go to a school of your choice. That sounds great in theory. Oh, great! Like my kids, I don't want my kids to go to this ran down school that's not doing good educationally. I'm gonna send them to a better school across town or in the next town over, next county, whatever it may be. But like you just said, like some kids just don't have that the resources to do that. The buses aren't going to come pick them up, so their parents are going to have to drop them off. They can't afford to do that. So their whole their whole plan is vouchers, from what I've understood. Um, Allow the parents to decide where their kids go to school, so they're not locked in on their local school that is or is not performing well. That sounds good, but a lot of the kids in those areas of the underperforming schools um, don't have the means to go to any other school, whether they wanted to or not. Um, and one thing I don't hear them talking about is the funding structure. Um, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know it 100%. Maybe you know it better than I do. Um, but the schools that perform the best get the best funding, correct? So if your school's constantly underperforming and not hitting their marks, you're getting less and less funding.
Uh,
Isn't that counterintuitive to those schools?
that can be in some cases, yeah. I mean, there are incentives for meeting certain scores and meeting certain benchmarks, which creates its own set of problems. Without going into a deep dive, I mean, if you incentivize schools to say, "Hey, we're going to give you lots of money if your students can pass this test," just what's the natural human reaction? Oh, what is the path of least resistance there? Oh, we are going to just teach to the test. We are essentially going to do whatever it is so they pass this test. No gauge on whether or
Yeah.
not anything's actually been learned or accomplished, but because we are being incentivized to do it because, the carrot being dangled. But going back to the point of, and this is actually an interesting point because Indiana does have the whole school's choice thing. This has been implemented here. And there is,
That is,
well, yeah, and there is many cases where there are students that are receive vouchers to go to better schools, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. And so what happens is those kids move out of either a local school system where they're at, and they go somewhere else. And in theory, it sounds good. okay, you're a parent, you get to choose where your kid goes to school. Hey, I want the best for my kid. I want them to go to, the best schools. Awesome. It sounds great. But another problem is then school dollars are tied directly to, what goes to what funds schools. Where do local schools get their money from? And the vast majority before federal dollars come into it, property taxes. So if you have a bunch of schools that are in neighborhoods where the average home value is, say, $50,000, you're not raking in a whole lot of money for property taxes, and therefore
No.
you don't have a whole lot of school funding just from the nature of the area. Nobody's fault, but just because of that. And so, if you have minimal dollars going to a school, you have less resources, you can't pay teachers that much, you're getting the bottom of the barrel if you get anybody at all. And so, then a parent looks at that and goes, "Oh, this school is horrible. They have no resource. They don't do anything. I'm going to send my kid elsewhere." And so, this is why you've also seen the explosion in the whole charter school model in the last X amount of years, because it's essentially an alternative to where, whether it be Fort Wayne Community Schools, Indianapolis Public Schools, the two big ones, to where they're fighting it tooth and nail because it's essentially, taking dollars away from their schools. So the students that are kind of like you were mentioning before, the students that can't go somewhere else, now stretch dollars are stretched even thinner. And so it's just perpetuating this problem, giant snowball effect of just making the whole situation worse. And so, like I said, there are some merits to the ideas, but once again, I feel like the ideas are nice, the intentions are somewhat good, but the execution is something to be greatly desired.
So that's a good point. The property taxes, the low income schools, and I'm making this stat up. I'm pretty sure I've heard it many different places. The low income housing areas of every town usually has the lower quality school systems. How do we correct that? Like what kind of, I mean, you can't charge these people more in property taxes. Could you set a state minimum funding for each school to where if the school's under a certain funding amount, um, the state covers the remainder? Like, is that something they can look into, having a minimum?
Well, and so this is one of those where, I can throw some ideas out there, but I don't pretend to have, the grandest solution. I mean, in all honesty, I find it ironic that they're trying to get rid of the Department of Education, because I've said for the longest time that the entire playbook needs thrown out the window. Like the way things are currently structured, whether it be the rules, the regulations, the processes, whatever, it has not been setting anybody up for success. And you've seen the result of it, increasing, the amount of high school seniors that I've taught over the years who who can barely read at the equivalent of a third grade level just shows that, okay, something's greatly wrong with this, and the whole thing needs thrown out and built from the ground up. But going back to your, how to potentially solve it. Okay, if the problem is they're not getting enough dollars because the dollars are tied to property taxes. Okay, so maybe tied to something else instead of property taxes equaling school dollars. Okay, where else could those school dollars come from? If you took something, may not work, but something like, okay, sales tax. What if you said that all sales tax that was accumulated in a certain area, neighborhood, okay, that's what went to schools. And so if you have a
What
more,
does sales tax currently go to?
I'd have to look into it, but I
More of a
don't.
general kind of tax.
I'm sure it's different everywhere you go. I'd have to dig more into it, but yeah, I think it's more of a general than like a specific thing. But think of
So
like,
here's another question while we're talking about funding.
sure.
If we eliminate the Department of Education, what happens to the federal money that's being allocated? Like the Department of Education is the department that's dictating where that money goes, how it's being spent. Um, so if we eliminate the Department of Education, is it just one sole person, the Secretary of Education, that's dictating uh, what's happening with this money, or are they just sending money to the states and letting them decide who to give the money to? Like how or are we just not sending money at the federal level at all?
So this is where, I'll probably get corrected at some point, but my current understanding of it is if you get rid of the Department of Education, that would include the Secretary of Education. That spot would be eliminated as well. And the way I understand it currently, they're essentially trying to absorb the Department of Education into a different department. I have to look up which. So essentially, that one would absorb the Department of Education. So,
So the way I understood it, hold on, is they're not eliminating that position because their whole fight during this last campaign was eliminate the Department of Education. So why would you then? Why would you even appoint a Secretary of Education when you control all branches of government, including the Supreme Court? They own it. They can eliminate it, but they're not. I don't think they're really going to. I think it's all just a big facade they're putting on. Because why would you
well,
appoint a secretary of a department you plan on eliminating when you own all houses of government, and that should be a fairly easy thing to eliminate. And they've made clear they don't care about doing the eliminating things the correct way.
here's why you do it. So when you first come into office, you have to appoint, you have to, who all you want. And that's what all these nominations are for. And so even if the plan is genuinely to get rid of the Department of Education, you still appoint somebody as the head of it because it's not going to happen overnight. Even if everything is approved, all the legal channels are done, it can't disappear overnight. It's a process. And so what you do is you appoint somebody that you want, obviously, that's going to, that's part of your plan, and you're basically using that person to look at the Department of Education and say, okay, when this gets merged into this other department, what are we keeping? What are we throwing out? What's good? What's bad? And so, you're having that person essentially run that wing of it, trying to figure all that out. And so, even if you are eventually going to get rid of it, you still have to have somebody that walks through the process. But then at the end of the day, you have to appoint them anyway, because let's say long shot it doesn't work, you can't get past the legal channels and it doesn't happen. Okay, you still have somebody there that's on your team that's running it. But then also the previous head, you would need to appoint somebody, because you're not going to leave the previous administration's department head of the Department of Education in place while you're trying to do everything you want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So here's another question. Go back to funding. Maybe it's counterintuitive. Maybe it's revolutionary. Who knows?
Oh God.
Um, you said the biggest problem with education is the incentivizing test-based funding. It forces teachers, it forces schools to only focus on tests and not the overall education of the student. So what if we eliminate incentives, provide a certain dollar amount per student to every school, whether they succeed, whether they fail, eliminate the incentive to only focus on the tests. Maybe restructure the tests, maybe less tests. We can discuss that whenever. But would eliminating the incentives be bad or to be good? Because from what I know, like I've met a lot of teachers. Most teachers teach because for the love of teaching. They're not
Sure.
doing it for the lucrative paycheck they get. They went into teaching knowing they were going to get fucked in the salary department. Um, but they did it because they enjoyed teaching. That's what they wanted to do. That's their passion. So what if we just eliminated the incentives to only focus on the tests? Do you think relying on the passion of the teachers is a good idea?
So you got to like put those in a bowl or something. That crinkling is
What do you mean?
so.
We're trying to make nerds out of our students.
It's like that movie, The Campaign. Oh, what were we talking about? Was it Diet Coke by Hans? No, I was not talking about Diet Coke. Um, so first off, that actually is a thing. So when you said, "Hey, we're going to tie funding to like just a number of students," so that is another thing. So funding doesn't solely come from test scores, but that's another. So the more students you can get in your schools, the way it's been set up so far, yes, the more federal dollars you get. So they're not exclusively tied to test scores. That's just another, hey, it's kind of like when you get government incentives, like, hey, oh, buy solar panels for your house, we'll give you a tax break. Oh, do this and we'll give you, a tax break here. It's the same thing where it's like, okay, there's a whole laundry list of things that schools do to try to get federal dollars. That's just one of them. But But no, I think that making incentivizing schools to pass tests in that way, I feel like it's been demonstrated over the past 2 decades. It doesn't work, and all it does is make the situation that much worse. And
I mean, it
I think,
worked for us.
well, think about it this way: there's no another big problem they run into, and I think they're actually starting to realize this and slowly starting to address it. There's no stopgap until you get to high school. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're in third grade, even if you do completely horrible, whatnot, you chances are they're going to push you on to fourth grade. The same thing with fifth, all the way till you get to junior, senior in high school. So you have, and this is why going back to what I said before, how you wind up with seniors in high school who can't read because they were never held back. They were never like, you know, there was never that stopgap. But now they get to be a senior in high school, they can't read, and they're expected to pass these tests that determine whether or not you get a diploma. And whether they like it or not, okay, by state rules, it's different where you go, but by state rules, you cannot get a high school diploma unless you pass this test, unless you do this. But which makes it virtually impossible because once again, they read at a third grade reading level, or their math skills are it's equivalent. And so what's been happening is you have they're changing the way they're doing it. They're lowering the standards. They're finding different pathways. And this actually brings up a point that I actually do agree with: different pathways to graduate high school. And it's different where you go, but a couple of experiences I've had. One school I taught at, there was three different ways of doing it. There was the traditional way. Okay, you pass the test, whatever. Okay, diploma, graduate, awesome. The second one was through military means. So if you, it was all tied to, hey, you still had to show up. Your attendance had to be past a certain benchmark. You still had to at least attempt all the tests. But hey, if you scored high enough on the ASVAB test and met some other requirements, okay, you could get a diploma going through that pathway. Then I think there was a third one tied to various programs. Like there was a nursing program at the school. There was a welding certification program to where, okay, hey, look, if you're not like the biggest, test taking person, not the biggest schooling person, but you can weld like a motherfucker, you can, you've shown you can be a hell of a nurse or, in that field. Okay, you can get your diploma through those means. And that's something I
I don't know
fully,
about you, but I don't really want a nurse that can't read.
well, I don't think that's,
I'm just saying. If she can't read the direction on the fucking medicine, I don't really want her as my nurse.
I,
Just
d-
gonna say that out.
I'm pretty sure the two are mutually exclusive in that regard. But my point is, okay, it loosens it up a little bit, but it's you're still having to demonstrate competence. You're still having to demonstrate your ability. But like, hey, oh, I suck at taking tests. I can't do it this way, but I can, be a baller in this way. And it's still something that's real world. It's tangible. It's not like it's something that's real. It's not a participation trophy or like, oh, we feel bad for you, so we're going to push you through. And so that I actually do support. But there are plenty of cases in a school, ones I more recently taught at, literally the way things were set up, it was designed to push the kids through the system at all costs. Teach the test, help them along, give them a million chances, no accountability for deadlines, attendance, anything like that. And it was just, one of the reasons I had to step away. But it's like I said,
What if schools had built apprenticeship programs with their local businesses to where that's another avenue um, where part of their day they go and work for companies and kind of develop useful skills. You reach out to your local businesses and see what their needs are, like what are their workforce needs, and then you kind of like your problem childs. You can see like what industries, if you have like press operators or
sure.
production operators or production positions that local businesses are really hurting for, you can kind of steer these kids that are on the wrong path to these businesses, work with them, and maybe gain a sense of worth or something like that. Um, and when they turn 18, they can go get a job, and that's their pathway.
No, absolutely. And stop me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they had that when we were through. They just called it Anthus Career Center. Remember?
Yeah, that was
Was
more
that not?
generalized. You had to decide. It wasn't through businesses. Um, like if you signed up for Anthus, you'd have to kind of pick what field you wanted to go into, and that none of that guaranteed a job or anything like that. It wasn't typically working through a company.
So maybe something.
You went to Anthus and you worked with their teachers.
So
But
maybe.
it's I guess it's close to that same premise though. Teaching the trades, which they should probably be bringing back into schools more.
Well, yeah, and I mean, taking that basic concept, but then, like you said, take that step further where you are. Okay, it's more connected to a direct business where you can see a clear pathway between where you're at now and when I actually graduate, okay, there's a spot for me. There's a hey, they're going to hook me up with a job or they're going to hook me up with an apprenticeship to kind of show you, okay, what life is going to be like after high school. And no, I 100% for it. I've seen it work in many regards, and I think it's a very effective tool. And I think it's at least a partial solution to the problem. But as far as the whole traditional standards, the academics, the standardized testing, it's like I said, am I for throwing out like the entire Department of Education system as a whole? Not really. But at the same time, I think the methods, the playbook essentially needs thrown out and redone from the ground up. And it,
Do you think it's too harsh? So say you have attendance standards, you have behavioral standards, academic standards. You have kids that are not showing up to school. They're not performing well in the classroom. They're being assholes in class. Is it too harsh to have a I don't know, come up some type of guideline or set number of like days they can miss or
well,
problematic issues where if they miss too much, they're being too much of an asshole, they hit the threshold, you ship them off to a like basically military boot camp. And you get them ready for like here's your two options. You're not performing in the classroom, you're not showing up. You're either gonna go to juvie or you're gonna go to the military. You choose. Is that too harsh?
it's not necessarily a thing about being harsh. Is the fact that I can tell you firsthand that the military's not going to want them either. Because I mean, it used. I mean, sure, it used to be that thing. Was it back in the Vietnam era, where if you got in trouble with the law, the judge gave you two options: hey, either go to jail or go to the military or some crap like that. The problem, I feel like that doing something like that's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. But I tell you what, I did, I said it as a joke at once, but I feel like, it'll never get past in a million years. But, genuine thought, just because, like I said, I taught most, inner city schools most of my life. And I thought, I've seen kids have been kicked out of this school, that school, behavioral issues, attendance, or whatever. Came with a bright idea. Will never happen in a million years, but just hear me out. So make it a law that, call it, just like baseball, call it three strikes without negative connotation, whatever. After that third school of being kicked out of, being expelled from, by law, the parents or whoever is legally responsible for that child now has to homeschool said child, but is still responsible for upholding all the same academic standards, state standards, whatever it is that the school would have to be. And so, and it sounds nuts, but I feel like what that does is it puts the.
So I'm gonna cut you off there.
Oh
I
God,
don't think in a million years it would ever succeed.
of course not.
The kids have been kicked out of three schools. Clearly, those parents don't give a fuck. They're not there for that kid. They're not making that kid do shit. Sending them home for the parents to homeschool is going to make that kid worse. It's going to give them more freedom. They're going to get less educated. And how are you going to enforce it with the parent? Arrest them if they don't?
Here's the thing. So the whole point of it is it puts the onus back on the person that needs to have the onus in the first place. Like you can't. So there's like this weird unspoken taboo in education to where you can say, "Oh, this is the problem," or "That's the problem," but at the end of the day, in no public forum are you allowed to utter the words, "Okay, this kid is making bad choices or making mistakes because you are fucking up as a parent." You are fucking up. You are the problem. You are not doing this. You're not doing this. But no, you can't say that. You can say, oh, no, this is the problem. It's a bad neighborhood. Oh, this, that, and the other. Or maybe, oh, you just suck as a fucking parent. Say again.
This says who?
Like I said, you can't go before a school board and say, okay, we've tried this and this. Have you ever considered it's just the parent that's fucking up? It's the parent's fault. Because what's the immediate reaction from the parent? Oh, you're telling me how to raise my kid? You can't tell me. Well, I've seen it, and it's once again this. Like I said, like we both agree, it'll never get passed in a million years. But the whole point is that it legally puts the parent responsible. It puts the onus back on them where it should have been all along, where it should be all along. Because at the end of the day,
So,
they
but
are
what's the
responsible.
repercussions?
So if they
What's the
don't,
repercussions on the parent?
like if the kid
Something's got
doesn't,
to happen. Go ahead.
like if are you saying if the parent doesn't, doesn't do it, doesn't actually go through the homeschool thing or whatever and doesn't do
Yes.
anything.
Yes. What's the repercussions? There's got to be a
I've,
consequence because they're not there for the kid when they don't have to do anything. So
well,
they're not going to be there for the kid when they have to.
in my
You can't
very
find broke people. They don't have any money.
no, well, my opinion would be I feel like it's failing to do that was I mean it's is it as extreme as not feeding the kid? Not quite, but in my opinion, it's just another form of okay, you're not doing your job. That simple as that. You're not doing your job to keep. Okay, your job is
You
to
can't
feed
fire
them.
parents.
Your job is to keep a correct, but I mean, it's your job to feed them. It's your job to keep a roof over their head. Let's take it to that conclusion. If you are a parent and you're not fulfilling those two things, you're not feeding them, you're not keeping a roof over their head. Okay, what happens? Usually, like CPS or something like that, right? You suddenly and then
Yeah.
then legal custody of said child comes into question, and those parents very well could lose custody of the kids. Okay,
And then the kid's back in school with no parental guidance, still making those same mistakes. So it's an endless loop. They'll go into foster care where they're not getting guidance, they're not getting help. Now they don't have their parent. Now they're going back to the school system that they just got kicked out of. It's just one big loop.
hey, I didn't say it was a perfect plan. I just said it was a plan to put the responsibility back to where it should have been all along.
I just
But
don't
I
see how that
digress.
helps.
Is it a grand solution is it perfect? No. Is it full of holes? Probably. But like I said, more of a interesting thought experiment, if nothing else.
Maybe.
But I digress.
I would disagree with it entirely, but
Hey, that's
who am
what
I? I'm not a teacher. I don't know these things.
doesn't take a teacher. It just takes people who give a damn enough to try to understand and try to learn more. Ugh.
All
So
right, so I guess we're coming to a point where we should probably start wrapping things up.
yeah, I suppose
We're
so.
slowing down.
So let me. I guess I'll pose to you. So you have Trump and his administration trying to shut down the Department of Education. So the question remains: who has the high ground in this situation?
In terms of what?
In terms of okay, let's say they do shut it down. What happened? Who essentially is benefiting from this whole situation?
Uh, I'm going to say no one's got the high ground because the plan is not defined well enough to make that determination. Right now, it's a toss up. We don't know what's going to happen. They haven't explained anything because I don't think they know what this looks like.
Fair enough. I would. I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say I'd make a slight argument for the states and maybe go so far as to say maybe the local economy or local industries, because kind of like we hinted to earlier, if it does happen, the federal aspect of it gets abolished, and then it's completely on the states to decide what the education system looks like within their state. How are they going to decide to shape it? Okay, what is best for Ohio? What is the best for Nevada? Oh, we lean heavily towards this industry, these kind of trades, this kind of education. And so, in a very messed up situation, in theory, those local industries, those local, businesses, whatever, essentially would benefit from that. Not saying it's, benefiting from the, not in the best way possible, but, you know, in a really messed up situation, okay, maybe they do come out on top. Or maybe they are the most beneficial of the whole thing.
Okay, so random question. What what's the industrial focus of Nevada? Alien hunting and gambling. What the hell are they gonna teach their kids? How to deal cards, how to play poker, and how to look for aliens.
Hey, statistics is a hot field. Um,
They're gonna teach card counting. Card counting. I don't know
there
what the
you
fuck
go.
I was trying to say. Card counting and alien hunting is their industries of choice.
I mean, not exactly a perfect segue, but I mean, isn't that what Sam and Dean did for years? Not alien hunting, but wasn't there an episode with some kind of alien involvement, or was it all just supernatural stuff?
I mean, I don't know. There's like 20 fucking seasons. They all mesh together into one long episode.
I guarantee we could go back and probably at least find one that at least hinted to it, but yeah, different. Song for another time.
I mean, technically, wouldn't demons be considered aliens because they're not of this world? Hell is not Earth. Hell is hell. It's a whole different place. So a demon is essentially an alien, isn't he?
Well,
Are angels aliens because they're from heaven, not from Earth?
I guess it depends on how you define it, because if you
They're
think,
not from the terrestrial part of Earth. That means they're extraterrestrial.
you know what,
God's a fucking alien. Revelation.
I'll tell you what. By strict definition, I think you might. Okay, I think you might have it if we're going strict definition, but
Only definition.
that's definitely going to need some more thought. We'll put that into it. We'll put that more in depth in an
So find
episode
some
of.
alternative facts, you MAGA fuck. Tell me how God's a person and he's not an alien. Blah blah blah.
100% for a different episode. We'll tell you what. When we start actually throwing supernatural into a mix of, in the rotation between Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and all that, fine. We'll have a great in-depth discussion about exact definitions and what we call things, and why not?
Well, I think we just determined what our next episode is. It's going to be talking about the Bible, real, fake, how it parallels to Lord of the Rings, because that's awesome.
I think we need to save that till we actually get
about the Bible.
I think we need to save that till we get a lot more further down the road with this stuff. Let's not do it in the first 6 episodes.
But too hardcore there.
Maybe initially. Let's get some traction.
That's how you get your name known.
Oh, is that
Trial
how?
By fire, right?
Until
you got a hot tool on that. Think she just leaned into that one, or she just went for
it? You're done. All right, we're wrapping this thing up.
Yep.
All right. Well, before we go, I think this might be at the one piece I actually have to edit. Well, that'll do it for this episode of The High Ground. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify. I don't think we can get Pandora. Maybe some point. And, of course, X.com.
X.com.
It's the new Twitter, I guess. Whether we like it or not. It's
I'm going to keep calling it Twitter.
I think you and half the rest of the planet. Well, I suppose for now, stay nerdy, stay knowledgeable,
and always have the high ground.